a young immigrant mother.
You have this single mom that's in the country to make a better way for her daughter.
A successful older man.
He basically swept her off her feet, and that's the American dream.
But her dream would soon turn into a nightmare.
This marriage is just like choking her, and she felt that she's going to get out by any means.
Even if in the end, it meant she had to choke back.
I was choking him, he was choking me. I thought I was gonna die.
November 21st, 2007. It was just before 9 a.m. in the affluent community of Merrick, New York, when the local emergency dispatch received a harrowing 911 call.
Nassau Police Emergency Operator. Yes. Okay, you're gonna have to stop crying, sweetheart, so I can understand you. What's the problem?
My husband tried to choke me this morning.
The caller was 29-year-old Kelly Forbes. She told the dispatcher she desperately needed help for her newlywed husband, 50-year-old Michael Forbes.
Is your husband conscious?
No.
Is he breathing?
I don't think so.
Moments later, police and emergency responders arrived at the Forbes residence. Inside, they found Kelly Forbes cowering at the top of the stairs.
I'm there crying, I'm shaking. I'm just scared out of my mind. And I pointed to the room where Michael was.
Brushing past Kelly, officers discovered the body of Michael. His 6-foot, 250-pound frame slumped across the floor.
The officer tried CPR, he tried mouth-to-mouth, and we're seeing if there was any sort of a resuscitation that would assist Michael Forbes.
The EMTs weren't exactly strangers in the Forbes home. They'd been there barely a month before when Michael had suffered a heart attack.
They got him up to the hospital and put the stent in the vein, you know. And that's the only thing that saved him.
Had Michael Forbes suffered a second heart attack? Questioned at the scene, his wife of less than 8 weeks gave police a very different account of what had just occurred. According to Kelly, there'd been an attack, all right, but it had nothing to do with Michael's heart.
Michael woke her up early in the morning by placing an electrical cord around her neck, attempting to strangle her in her sleep.
I tried to push him off and he wouldn't come off.
And in the midst of the ensuing struggle, she'd somehow managed to wrap the cord around Michael's neck.
He was trying to kill me. All I did was try to defend myself.
Now, as the EMTs fought to save Michael's life, detectives were left to unravel the mystery of what really happened. A truth that lay hidden somewhere in not one, but two secret lives. Kelly and Michael Forbes first met 2 years earlier in Brooklyn, New York. Kelly, a 27-year-old single mother, had recently moved to the city with her daughter from her native Trinidad.
I moved to New York to basically start over. I had my daughter. She was young at the time, and her father and I had just broken up. So one of my brothers, Nicholas, he was already living here. So I moved in with him.
You know, we have more, well, I guess, family here, you know, than other states, really. So, yeah, I guess New York was a place to be.
Not long after moving in with her brother, Kelly had gotten a job as a medical assistant at a Brooklyn doctor's office.
She drew blood, she took EKGs, she did all the patient care, pretty much.
She's a very caring person, so when her patients come in, she treats them with the utmost care.
Kelly's delicate touch left an impression on one patient in particular, a local barbershop owner named Michael Forbes.
He came in to do a stress test. I was the one that did his IV, and he was telling me that he was really scared of needles. So I said, this is not gonna hurt. So he was like, are you good? I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good. And I did it, and he was like, I didn't feel a thing.
Michael may not have felt the needles prick, but he did feel something else.
He was infatuated with her. You know, just, yo, man, I met this girl. She got long hair, has an accent, brown skin. Just always talked about her. Like, you know, she was like a goddess.
Michael wasn't interested in worshiping her from afar, however.
He left his number for her at the front desk, telling him that he wanted to take her out or whatever.
Kelly's coworkers were impressed with her new suitor. Cutting hair wasn't Michael's only job, and his other work paid very well.
He said he was into real estate. He owned a couple of houses in Brooklyn.
But at 48 years old, he was also 21 years Kelly's senior. And with her hands full with her job and daughter, Kelly intended to keep her relationship with Forbes strictly professional.
I didn't have time for a relationship at that point, and I made it known to him.
Michael, however, wasn't about to give up.
Michael began to woo her by sending flowers to the doctor's office. And I don't mean once, tons of flowers were delivered.
Michael's persistence eventually paid off. In late September of 2006, Kelly agreed to a date, and the steady stream of gifts turned into a flood.
He sent roses to the job constantly. He would take her out to like elaborate places. He was that kind of guy.
He made me feel like, you know, like a princess, basically.
Michael had every intention of making Kelly his queen, too. Less than a month after their first date, he proposed.
I said, this is way too soon. And he told me that he loved me, and I just kept saying, you don't know me that well, I don't know you that well.
But Michael didn't seem all that interested in exploring their respective pasts. Instead, he urged his would-be bride to focus on their future.
He was emailing her pictures of $1 million homes on Long Island that he was telling her he was going to buy for her.
And when he proposed for a second time with an even bigger diamond ring, it was hard for the 28-year-old single mother to say no.
I wanted my daughter to be happy. I wanted to be happy. So I was like, you know what? Give it a chance. What's the worst that could happen?
It wasn't exactly an enthusiastic yes. But at their wedding ceremony a year later, Kelly and Michael certainly seemed happy. Michael also seemed determined to earn his new bride's devotion, no matter what it cost.
He had laid out a tremendous amount of money for a Caribbean-style wedding that Kelly wanted.
It was a very big wedding. He pretty much went all out for it.
But would it be enough? At the reception, watching her son and new daughter-in-law dance within the drum circle, Michael's mother wasn't so sure.
I saw Michael, you know, in the middle of the circle, and they just beating the drums. But it reminded me of maybe a sacrifice.
Two weeks later, following their honeymoon, Michael made good on one of his many courtship promises, surprising his bride with a waterfront home.
The house is a split-level ranch in Merrick, New York, right on the water, very affluent community here in Nassau County.
There was, however, one major problem from Kelly's perspective. Merrick was over an hour commute from Brooklyn, where her life had been based since immigrating to the United States.
It was too far because I worked in Brooklyn. My daughter went to school in Brooklyn.
Michael moved her away from her family, away from her friends.
Distance wasn't the only issue either.
She didn't have a car. Michael had the only car.
I was in the house by myself, and I told him, I was like, this is not what I got married for.
Was Michael keeping her cooped up in the house on purpose? Was he trying to keep her under control? Whatever the answer, less than 2 weeks into the marriage, Kelly was ready to pull the plug.
We started arguing, and I said, I'm going back to Brooklyn.
Kelly moved back in with her family. She moved back in with her brother in Brooklyn.
Kelly would stay the occasional night with her husband.
When she did come home, she had to leave the next morning early to get her train to go to work.
The hour train ride wasn't all that ate into their time together either.
We would have arguments about time. He would get upset because we wasn't spending enough time together.
It wasn't long before the petty squabbling took its toll. Less than a month after the wedding, Michael was awakened by severe chest pains one night when Kelly wasn't home.
This person, supposed to be his wife, wasn't home that time of night. So he called us. Instead of me going there, I called an ambulance to go there.
They realized he's having a heart attack, and then they got him up to the hospital.
As Michael lay in the hospital, many of his family and friends gathered by his bedside. Kelly finally showed up, but she didn't stay long.
I did ask him where was Kelly, and he would just excuse it, like, oh, she had something to do in Brooklyn. Maybe he's a little embarrassed that his wife is in there.
But Michael's cardiac scare also led to a change of heart. Just days after coming home from the hospital, he made Kelly a peace offering.
I went to take the garbage out in the garage, and I saw a Mercedes-Benz sitting in the garage that he bought for me. And he said, I have a car now. I could go to work, whatever. He apologized.
Kelly was happy to take the keys her husband offered, but rather than allow her to commute from Merrick, the Mercedes simply made it easier for Kelly to trek to Brooklyn and stay.
She'd work all week long, and every weekend she'd go to Brooklyn and spend the weekend with her people.
And when Kelly was back in Merrick, she usually wasn't there to help nurse her convalescent husband.
Her daughter was adapting to being in a new situation away from everyone that she knew. So at night, she would go in and tuck her in and fall asleep, and he really didn't like that.
He would come wake me up and start arguing. He would say, I am married to him. I'm supposed to be in his bed.
She was just to the point that, it's too early for them to be having this much conflict. So she's like, I need to get out.
November 21st, 2007. It was just before 9 a.m. when Nassau County Emergency Dispatch received a frantic 911 call from the home of Michael and Kelly Forbes. On the line was Kelly, and she told the dispatcher she desperately needed help.
Is your husband conscious?
No.
Is he breathing?
I don't think so.
Minutes later, a Nassau County patrolman arrived on the scene. In an upstairs room, the officer found Michael's unresponsive body crumpled on the floor.
He tried CPR, he tried mouth-to-mouth, and both were unsuccessful.
Requesting paramedics, the officer asked Kelly what had happened. She indicated the orange electrical cord lying on the floor, not far from her husband.
And at this point, she says, he came at me with a cord. I had to defend myself.
What could she do? She's 5'6", 130 pounds, maybe. He's, again, 260-pound guy.
Michael, according to Kelly, had come at her with the cord, but it had apparently ended up around his neck. Coming up, police trying to determine who the real victim was in the Forbes house that morning.
He wouldn't get off. So I took a piece of the cord, put it around his neck.
On the morning of November 21st, 2007, the yard outside Kelly and Michael Forbes' Merrick, New York home was bathed in the blue lights from half a dozen squad cars. They'd come in response to a 911 call Kelly had placed moments earlier.
Is your husband conscious?
No.
Is he breathing?
I don't think so.
According to what Kelly told the first officers on the scene, her husband had just tried to kill her in her sleep.
She shouted to the officer who arrived in the house, "He tried to strangle me. He tried to strangle me."
All I did was try to get him off me. All I did was try to defend myself, to protect myself.
She had apparently succeeded. Despite the efforts of emergency personnel, Michael's prospects didn't look good as he was loaded into the ambulance.
There were no signs of life. He was officially pronounced dead later at the hospital.
And just how had Michael died? An official ruling would depend on the autopsy results, but the police at the scene suspected it had something to do with the series of bruises beneath Michael's chin.
There was not a doubt in my mind those were ligature marks.
Why would Kelly's husband attack her? And how did she not only survive, but end up killing him instead? Determined to get to the bottom of what had happened, detectives asked Kelly to come back to the precinct and make a statement. But first, she said she had to take care of her daughter. The 7-year-old had slept through Kelly's struggle with Michael, only to be awakened by the police sirens.
I'm there crying, I'm shaking, I'm just scared out of my mind. And she comes and she hugs me and she said, "Mommy, I love you." I was like, "I love you too." And I told her something happened, so Mommy got to talk to the police for a while.
Minutes later, in a police interrogation room, detectives asked Kelly to explain what exactly had happened with her husband that morning, starting from the beginning. And the story Kelly told was of a brief 8-week marriage, punctuated by abuse.
There were two specific claims that she made. She made one claim that Michael smacked her in the head, and there was another claim where she stated that Michael was at the top of the stairs and he shook her from behind.
Kelly explained that she'd never filed charges against her husband. Instead, she said after each incident, Michael had broken down and begged her to stay.
He asked me to forgive him. Sometimes I blame myself because I knew the situation I was in, and I stayed.
And earlier that morning, according to Kelly, Michael's behavior hadn't just been abusive. It had been attempted murder.
That's the last thing I remember. Everything just went blank after that. I thought that was like I was gonna die.
Kelly told the officers that it all started the night before. She and Michael had gotten into an argument over the amount of attention Kelly had been paying to her daughter.
So I said, I'm gonna get her ready for bed and then we'll talk. So he said, all right. He walks off.
Kelly said once Michael had left the room, she'd gotten in bed with her daughter.
She's laying on the bed, I'm laying on the bed. We both fall asleep.
A few hours later, according to Kelly, she'd woken back up, and after making sure her daughter was still asleep, crept back to the master bedroom. Inside, she said she'd found Michael waiting up and furious.
He said, what the F are you coming into bed for? He was like, get the F out.
Kelly told police she'd left the room, grabbed a comforter, and tried to make a bed on a sofa in an adjacent room. But she said Michael had soon followed her into the room. And according to Kelly, he'd had a lot on his mind.
He began arguing about everything. I was like, you know what? If I make your life that stressful, that miserable, I'll leave.
According to Kelly, Michael's reaction to the suggestion had hardly been the one she expected.
He started laughing. He said, that's not going to happen.
Kelly said she'd finally fallen asleep on the sofa, but maybe an hour later, Michael woke her up with an electrical cord.
Michael placed the cord around her like that, which doesn't really give you a lot of leverage as the attacker.
Kelly said she'd managed to roll off the couch before Michael had been able to fully tighten the electrical cord around her neck.
I didn't know it was him until I rolled off the sofa and I got up and I saw him standing in front of me. And I just went numb. I was so scared.
And that's when, according to Kelly, Michael had grabbed her by the throat and begun to squeeze with his hands.
I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't feel anything. The only thing I know that he was trying to choke me. And he's not letting go.
Kelly told the police that she kneed him in the groin.
Kelly said Michael had fallen to the ground, pulling her down with him. And the struggle, according to Kelly, had continued on the floor.
He had me by my neck, and he was trying to put the cord back. He was squeezing my neck, and he wouldn't get off. So I took a piece of the cord. It was a long cord. And I put it around his neck and started pulling, hoping that he would let go. But he didn't, and I don't even know how long that lasted for.
The daughter was in the next room. She was fighting for her life. She was just trying to survive.
The next thing I remember was seeing him laying there, and he wasn't moving. And I tried shaking him. I was like, Michael. And he wasn't getting up.
Afraid that Michael was dead, Kelly said she'd quickly called her brother and father in Brooklyn. She also told police she had called a friend named Jeremy Bryant.
He lived in Hempstead. He was the closest one there. And I tried to tell him what happened. I was crying so much that, you know, I don't think he understood what I was saying. So he told me to call 911.
Kelly's version of events certainly sounded like a clear case of self-defense. But was it true? It all hinged on one question. Was Michael an abusive husband, so out of control that he'd try to strangle his wife in her sleep? The detectives weren't necessarily sure. For starters, if Kelly and Michael had been engaged in such a violent struggle, why had her daughter slept through the whole thing?
She was asked whether or not she made any noise. And she said, I didn't want to scream because I didn't want to wake my daughter up.
I remember thinking about was my daughter sleeping. And I couldn't do anything.
It was an explanation that police found hard to believe.
She's about to breathe her last breath. She's about to meet her maker. And better for her daughter to be an orphan than to wake up because she didn't want to make any noise. It made no sense at all.
And without her daughter as a witness, police had only the physical evidence to confirm Kelly's story. The bruises around Michael's neck certainly suggested that he'd been strangled. But what about Kelly?
What they saw was a small bruise about the size of a thumb on her wrist, and they also saw a bruise on her arm.
Why weren't there any bruises on Kelly's neck? After all, didn't she claim Michael had strangled her first?
There were no tears to her pants or tank top. There was no clothes out of place. There were no rips, no bloody lips, no black eye.
To police, Kelly didn't look like she'd just been through the fight of her life with a man twice her size. Neither, for that matter, did the crime scene.
This room was messy. Certain things were out of place, but certainly not a scene that would be indicative of some sort of violent struggle that Kelly described to the police.
Did that imply the struggle didn't occur? At this point, the investigators weren't sure. Still, despite the inconsistencies in Kelly's statement, some facts about the case were certain.
There was no doubt that he was dead. There was no doubt that Kelly pulled on the cord, and because Kelly pulled on the cord, he died. There was no doubt.
And that alone was enough for an arrest.
She was placed under arrest by the police based on her statement.
Considering she'd claimed self-defense, Kelly was stunned by the turn of events.
I'm thinking they're gonna take me back home. Then he came back in with a little card with my rights on it.
Kelly was booked on second-degree murder charges and immediately taken to jail.
12:30 in the morning, the following morning, one of the detectives called me and told me, he said, well, I just want to inform you your sister was being arrested for murder. And then he hung up.
I was scared. I haven't seen my family. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't know where my daughter was. I was just in shock.
Coming up, police dig deeper into Kelly's marriage and what she was doing outside of it.
Jeremy Bryant produced a series of text messages sent by Kelly.
They had met on a social networking website.
On Thanksgiving morning, November 22nd, 2007, 29-year-old Kelly Forbes sat in a Nassau County jail cell. She'd confessed to strangling her husband Michael with an electrical cord the morning before. But Kelly had insisted she'd only choked Michael in self-defense after he had attacked her first.
He was trying to kill me. I told him I never meant for this to happen. I've never been in a fight in my life.
And the shock had scarcely worn off hours later when she was ushered into a Long Island courtroom and arraigned on murder charges.
I couldn't even stand up. I was crying so much. And the day when he said second-degree murder is like, I don't know, I can't explain that feeling.
As Kelly fell apart, her attorney entered her plea, not guilty by reason of self-defense, which put a little pressure on the prosecutors.
Typically in Nassau County, the prosecutor has to indict someone who's accused of a felony within 6 days. If the prosecutor fails to get an indictment at that time, the defendant must be released.
Not only would Kelly be released, without an indictment, the DA would be forced to drop the murder charges. It was a small glimmer of hope for Kelly Forbes as she was taken back to the cell where she was being held without bond.
They didn't have enough evidence, or things wasn't adding up. So everything was looking very, very optimistic.
If a grand jury failed to reach a unanimous decision, she would be released and back home with her daughter in just 6 days.
All she wanted to do was to see her daughter.
I was scared. The lawyer explained, a lot of legal terms I didn't understand. But my dad, he said he's a very good lawyer, so I trusted that they were going to fight for me.
Nassau County police and prosecutors, however, had no intention of letting Kelly off easily. But with the clock ticking, they had only days to gather additional evidence to bolster their case. Step 1, try and substantiate Kelly's accusations of abuse.
In order for her to sustain a defense of justification, she had to believe that Michael was going to kill her. And that claim would have been sustained by any past abuse to determine whether or not that was a reasonable belief for her to have.
There was only one little problem as far as Kelly's accusations of abuse were concerned.
There were no reports to police, no complaints to friends, nothing.
Questioning Kelly and Michael's family and friends didn't produce any evidence that Kelly had ever complained about abuse either. But she had apparently complained plenty about Michael.
They all described that. Kelly complained constantly about Michael, disgusted with Michael. I can't stand Michael. Every negative word in the book, but never once did she ever describe any physical abuse.
But by far, the most important of Kelly Forbes' friends that police spoke to was Jeremy Bryant. In her statement to the police, Kelly had admitted calling Bryant before she dialed 911.
He was a friend of mine. I met him, I think, like about 9 months before I moved to Merrick.
The first call she makes is not to the police or a doctor or to a neighbor.
Kelly had said she called Jeremy because he was closest. But did that make any sense? After all, when police questioned Jeremy, he admitted he'd done little other than offer advice.
He asked her, did you check for a pulse? Call an ambulance. Call 911. Get him help. Those were his original responses.
Jeremy told police Kelly had texted him too, messages that he had just happened to have saved on his phone.
Jeremy Bryant produced a series of text messages that he claimed were sent by Kelly after she killed her husband.
Kelly texted them back and forth and said, she did it.
Were the messages all part of a desperate woman's call for assistance? Or were they an admission of guilt? Only one thing was certain. Jeremy Bryant's phone indicated that the first message was sent at 8:17 a.m., long before Kelly had called 911 at 8:48 a.m.
She waited about a half an hour before reaching out to anybody.
According to what Kelly had earlier told police, the attack had occurred at 7:30 in the morning, meaning she'd waited an additional 47 minutes before she had texted Jeremy.
She didn't call the police for about 78 minutes after she strangled Michael. She waits and she calls up Jeremy Bryant.
And there was still the question of just why she had called Jeremy. Was it simply, as Kelly had claimed, that he was the closest? Or was there another reason? Speaking to the police, Jeremy revealed just how close he and Kelly were.
She calls up an individual that she was carrying on an extramarital affair with.
Jeremy told the investigators he'd first met Kelly on an internet dating site where she went by the screen name of Sexy Trini.
She was from Trinidad, and that was one of the names she used, Sexy Trini.
According to Jeremy, they'd started hanging out before she'd met Michael, but they had continued to see each other after Kelly had gotten married. And Michael, according to his mother, had started getting suspicious.
He knew something wasn't right, because he would say to me, I wonder why she go to Brooklyn so much, why she stays in Brooklyn.
I think that was one of the frustrations that Michael had with Kelly, is that she was still carrying on with men on the phone and on the internet.
On November 23rd, Michael's autopsy report returned from the medical examiner's office. According to the report, the force and pressure that Kelly had applied to Michael's neck was bone-crushing.
Strangling somebody to death is no easy task. Our medical examiner described the type of force and pressure needed to be placed on that neck in order to kill Michael. So much pressure that the cartilage in his neck was crushed.
And she would have had to hold that pressure for a long time.
He described a time period of a minimum of 10 seconds to a minute of applied pressure on that neck in order to cause death.
He's sitting there just pulling and pulling and pulling. This is a lot of strength and this is a lot of hate that did this.
Which begged the question, if the strangling was merely the side effect of a life and death struggle, how did Kelly manage to overpower a man twice her size? For prosecutors, the answer was obvious. Kelly's story about the fight simply wasn't true.
This was not a simple accident. This took work.
But would the grand jury agree? When they finally submitted their case that afternoon, prosecutors were confident they'd uncovered enough evidence to secure an indictment.
Unfortunately, the grand jury wanted additional information.
At that time, Miss Forbes was not indicted, and she was released. We ultimately won her freedom.
Kelly naturally was thrilled.
I was relieved. I walked out to the car park and there were like cameras everywhere, and I just ran into the car.
She was optimistic. Everybody was optimistic because, the lawyers were encouraging.
Watching the entire scene unfold, Michael's family feared they'd never see justice.
She had a high-powered lawyer, and he was on the TV just about 2 or 3 times a day saying that, look, the grand jury didn't convict her. So, it was kind of put fear,
Were their fears justified? Not entirely, as Kelly learned only hours after her release.
We went straight to the lawyer's office, and he explained to me they couldn't get second-degree murder, so they're going to try for a lesser charge, which would be first-degree manslaughter.
2 days later, prosecutors submitted the new charges before a second grand jury.
Manslaughter in the first degree is that with the intent to cause serious physical injury, you cause the death of another individual. As a result of her actions, she caused his death.
This time, prosecutors quickly secured an indictment. Kelly was immediately taken back into custody. Coming up, when the case goes to trial, stunning new evidence reveals that Kelly wasn't the only one who knew what it was like to sit in a jail cell.
I was there, shocked as everyone else.
On June 2, 2008, Kelly Forbes walked into the Nassau County Criminal Court to stand trial. She'd been arrested in November of 2007 for strangling her husband, Michael. But after a grand jury had failed to indict her for murder, prosecutors had been forced to settle for a manslaughter indictment. And now it was up to 12 men and women to weigh those charges against Kelly's claim of self-defense. If convicted, the 29-year-old former medical assistant faced up to 25 years in prison. In their opening statement, the prosecution painted Kelly as a fickle young woman, married to a man 20 years her senior.
She was somebody that could not handle a relationship in a mature and responsible way.
Kelly was so immature, according to prosecutors, that in a mere 8 weeks, her marriage was already coming apart.
She felt trapped. She just had to get out, and just each day, maybe this marriage is just like choking her.
Yet somehow, it was Kelly's husband who ended up being choked. According to prosecutor Michael Canty, the implication was obvious.
She had an opportunity, and she was angry and frustrated and disgusted with Michael. And she managed to get that cord around his neck, and she strangled him.
He said he's going to prove that, and he pointed and he raised his voice that this woman killed her husband. And he pointed at me, and I was like, I started crying.
Kelly was crying now. But according to the prosecutors, she hadn't been so hysterical after she'd strangled Michael. As evidence, they called Jeremy Bryant to the stand. During the investigation, police had found out that Kelly and Jeremy were more than just friends, as Kelly had initially claimed.
We decided to go have lunch, get some drinks. And I guess I did have a little too much to drink. And one thing led to another, and, we slept together.
In his testimony, Jeremy told jurors about the text messages he'd received from Kelly immediately after Michael's death. Messages that indicated Kelly had waited more than an hour before calling police.
She didn't call 911. She didn't reach out for a doctor. And at this point, Michael was absolutely no threat to her at all.
None of that happened. She's just calling someone saying, I did it. He's dead. Just shows that, this plan that she had, came to fruition.
Next, in an effort to discredit Kelly's claims of self-defense, prosecutors asked Bryant whether he'd ever seen any evidence of physical abuse.
I asked Jeremy, I said, you've had the opportunity to see Kelly in the most intimate of settings, with no clothes on. Did she ever show any signs of abuse, any bruising, any black eyes? And his answer was clear, no, never.
And according to Jeremy, she'd never so much as mentioned abuse either.
Never. All she did was complain about Michael.
That was really disappointing. I told him about what I was going through at home. I thought that, okay, he's going to testify, at least somebody going to say something on my part. And it was the total opposite.
After Jeremy's testimony, Michael's friends and family started breathing a little easier.
When her boyfriend came in and testified against her, I think that was pretty strong.
Prosecutors didn't ask jurors to take Jeremy's word for it either. Calling the medical examiner to the stand, they reminded the jury that Michael had suffered a heart attack barely a month before his death.
When he got out of the hospital, he was in no condition to care for himself.
Weeks later, would he have been in any condition to initiate the violent struggle Kelly had described to police? According to prosecutors, the answer was no. To reinforce the point, they asked the medical examiner to testify about the medications Michael was taking. According to his testimony, not only had Michael been in no shape to start a fight, he'd barely been able to defend himself.
He would have been basically physically impotent. Lack of muscle coordination, weak, lethargic. Certainly somebody that was not a threat to Kelly Forbes.
The proof, they said, was how Kelly had somehow managed to escape what she claimed had been a life or death struggle, relatively unscathed. In fact, the only injuries Kelly had suffered were bruises on her wrists and arms. But prosecutors claimed these were the result of Michael's desperate, dying attempt to pry his wife off of him.
These were bruises that Michael most likely inflicted as he was breathing his last breath.
When it came time to present their case, Kelly's attorney turned the toxicology evidence on its head, arguing that several of the medications in Michael's system could, in certain situations, result in adverse side effects where a person might become more violent.
The side effects of the drugs that were in Michael's system could cause one to be violent, to have mood swings, to become irrational, to hallucinate.
And if the drugs had caused Michael to become violent, it wouldn't have been the first time. Michael, as the defense revealed, had an extensive history of drugs and violence.
He had rapes and robberies, and all of which came out, and the jury had full knowledge of that.
One of the drug dealers working under him did not pay his drug debt. So Michael and some other guys went to this drug dealer's house, duct taped the guy's girlfriend, and raped her and held her hostage so that the drug dealer would come back and pay his drug debt.
As the defense attorneys walked jurors through Michael's rap sheet, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. No one more so than Kelly.
There he was, his picture, and all his charges, most of his charges, attempted murder, rape, robbery. And I was there shocked as everyone else because I didn't know.
Some of the charges had been dismissed, but others had led to convictions that landed Michael in jail. However, all of them were more than 2 decades old. Michael had done his time, putting his years in prison to use by learning a trade. And once he'd gotten out, he'd opened his barbershop and turned his back on his old ways. Or had he?
According to the records that we subpoenaed and were introduced into evidence, Michael Forbes was claiming about $45,500 a month of income from that barbershop. So one legitimate question that we asked, and that really was never answered to our satisfaction, was where's Michael Forbes getting this money from?
The Forbes family, who felt so confident after Jeremy Bryant's testimony days before, suddenly started to worry.
That was hard. Her lawyer tried to say that his place was a drug place.
The prosecutors scrambled to shift the jury's focus from Michael's past to the crime Kelly stood accused of.
I wanted to clearly demonstrate to the jury that Kelly was certainly not the victim here.
At the end of his closing argument, prosecutor Michael Canty picked up the orange electrical cord from the evidence table, the same cord Kelly admitted to wrapping around her husband's throat, and crossed to the jury box.
Kelly pulled that cord for a minimum of 10 seconds, and I sat there with the cord and I held it out, and I looked up at the clock in the courtroom, and in silence I pulled that cord taut, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited.
Coming up, the jury delivers its verdict, but which will matter more in jurors' minds, Kelly's actions or Michael's criminal past?
It was very plausible that a jury would be able to grab onto it and find a reasonable doubt.
On June 16, 2008, Kelly Forbes was seated at the defendant's table in a Nassau County, New York criminal court. Accused of strangling her husband to death, the 29-year-old widow was awaiting the verdict in her manslaughter trial, a verdict that appeared to hinge on her claims of self-defense and her late husband's extensive criminal record.
It was very plausible that a jury would be able to grab onto it and find a reasonable doubt.
Moments later, the jury announced it had reached a decision. In the crowded courtroom, the clerk read the jury's verdict aloud. Guilty.
I don't think anybody was expecting a guilty verdict. So when they said guilty, Kelly, she was silent at first and then she started to cry.
She could have went under the table like that, just flat, and screamed.
My knees got weak. I couldn't feel my legs. I just dropped on the chair.
Kelly's defense attorneys were almost as dismayed. There was, however, still one more fight left. 8 weeks later, Kelly was back in court for sentencing. She faced a maximum of 25 years.
This was my first time ever getting into trouble. So everyone was expecting, something minimum.
She'd only be disappointed again.
When the judge said 21 years, I didn't even have a reaction. I just sat there. He spoke. I was just shocked.
Kelly's sentence was only 4 years short of the maximum, but Michael's family was disappointed as well. In fact, for Michael's mother, even the full 25 years wouldn't have been enough.
This wouldn't satisfy me, but it would make me feel a lot better if they would have given her the same thing she gave Michael.
She could have been honest with Michael and said, this is not going to work, but she killed him because he was generous, and she just wanted it all without Michael.
But Kelly doesn't see it quite the same way. Now in prison, she sticks by her story of an early morning struggle, maintaining that she only killed Michael in order to save herself.
I didn't mean for this to happen. Yes, Michael died. I didn't mean for this to happen. They tried to make it seem that it was planned, that I had a motive for doing it when I didn't.
They were two women who'd never met.
There was no connection between the families.
But they had one thing in common. They both wanted a baby girl.
I was really looking forward to having my family. When I got pregnant again, I'm like, okay, this better be a girl.
And in September of 2006, each woman would get her wish. A beautiful newborn.
The baby's grandmother was so excited. She put a big sign out in front of the house.
But that's where the two women's paths both met and diverged. Because while one would have her baby through a difficult delivery,
she had a C-section, so, she was healing from the stitches.
The other would resort to more desperate measures.
She came out brandishing a knife and a gun.
And she said, I want your baby girl.
It was 20 till 1 on the afternoon of September 15, 2006, when a frantic call came into the Franklin County, Missouri 911 center.
And what's the problem? This lady just came in and said somebody stole the baby. Someone stole her baby? Yes.
And the mother, according to the 911 call, had no clue as to the kidnapper's identity.
I have no idea who stole your baby. I know she was some stranger. She broke in my house.
The call kicked off a massive search for the missing infant.
National Guard came in, the FBI came in. We had volunteers from all over searching the woods.
and the story captured the nation's attention.
When you hear that it's a newborn that's missing, everybody wants to have a happy ending.
But while America hoped and prayed, police struggled with two questions. Was the distraught mother telling the truth?
There were some things at the crime scene that didn't really make sense.
It kind of made us question some of the veracity of her statements.
And would police find the child in time?
Well, everyone feared that perhaps he was dead.
In the summer of 2006, 21-year-old Stephanie Woods and her husband James were preparing to welcome a new baby. It would be the high school sweetheart's second child. Son Connor was still in diapers.
I wanted a girl the first time, and then it ended up being a boy, and when I got pregnant again, I'm like, okay, this better be a girl.
On September 8, 2006, she went into labor at St. John's Mercy Hospital in the nearby town of Washington. After a cesarean delivery, she got the news she'd been hoping for. It was a girl. As Stephanie recovered in the hospital, her mother, Raylene, readied James and Stephanie's house for the homecoming of her new granddaughter, Abby.
Raylene was so excited that she put a big sign out in front of the house like so many of us.
While Stephanie was also thrilled to finally have the baby girl she always wanted, she still faced several weeks of recovery from the birth.
She had had a C-section. She was still very uncomfortable, wasn't back to normal.
She was sore and a little crabby, but she's a tough girl.
And that September, the entire nation would learn just how tough Stephanie Woods was. 7 days after the birth of her daughter, Stephanie Woods was gradually making the difficult adjustment to mother of two.
Even though it's only a week in at this point, we had a routine that, we had to do. When the baby's hungry, it's gonna eat.
James was at work. Connor was in his playpen. And week-old Abby had just fallen asleep in the crib when Stephanie laid down to grab a quick nap.
I was tired, but I think the adrenaline of a new baby will kind of keep you going, even if you haven't seen sleep in a month.
Stephanie had barely drifted off when a woman she'd never seen before walked through the front door.
She was halfway in before Stephanie realized what was happening.
When you're caught off guard, as I was at that point, I just was kind of looking for, what do you want? What can I help you with?
The woman said her car had broken down and asked to use the phone.
She handed the woman the phone, and then the woman said that she needed to use the bathroom. And so the woman went into the bathroom.
But when she re-emerged a few minutes later, she was no longer holding the phone.
She came out brandishing a knife and a gun.
And that's when the woman waving the gun revealed the real reason she'd come barging into Stephanie's living room.
She told Stephanie, "I'm here for your baby girl." And those are the words that Stephanie will never, ever forget.
The woman was after 7-day-old baby Abby, the little girl that Stephanie had always wanted.
Obviously, Stephanie didn't want to have anything to do with that, and there was quite a struggle.
It wasn't exactly a fair fight.
Stephanie just had a C-section, and so she was recovering from the stitches.
She, I'm sure, shouldn't have been very physically strong at that time.
And while the assailant was armed, she never fired the gun. She did, however, use her knife.
Stephanie was stabbed above her left breast. She was stabbed in the back. She had defensive wounds on her hand. Her thumb was almost severed.
1-year-old Connor witnessed the entire attack.
He saw things that he should have never had to see at his age.
Overpowering Stephanie, the woman with the knife forced her into a chair. Then, after tying Stephanie up, the woman took the knife and slashed the struggling mother's throat. Stephanie Woods wasn't about to give up, however.
All you got to do is put yourself in that position. Imagine that you've got a 5-day-old child at home and somebody comes by and snatches that child from you.
Stephanie freed herself from the chair and grabbed a knife from the kitchen table. But the woman overpowered her and choked her until she passed out. Then she grabbed Stephanie and Connor and shoved them into the bathroom.
She locked her in the bathroom and took the baby, leaving the little boy in the house alone with the mom passed out.
Perhaps 20 minutes passed before Stephanie regained consciousness. Connor's crying woke her.
He had had blood on him. So for me, I didn't even really look at my injuries. I mean, I could feel the pain, but it was more on him. Is he okay?
The toddler was unhurt, but what about the baby?
And then it hit me, Abby's not here.
She was gone, taken by the woman with the knife. Not only that, the kidnapper had also taken the phone. Stephanie realized there was only one thing to do. She picked up her screaming son and stumbled out the door.
She managed to carry Connor from her house to the next neighbor's house, which was not immediately next door.
It was a miracle that she didn't bleed out as she was running the long distance away to the house to get help.
Although according to Stephanie, there was nothing miraculous about it.
I'm a mom. I mean, that's as simple as it is. I needed that other part of me, which was her.
And she was going to get help for her children, whatever it took.
She walked up the road barefoot. It's a gravel road.
She's the strongest person I know in this world. She had a baby, cesarean. She had her throat cut. She was stabbed in the back. And my daughter found the strength to walk probably the length of 3 football fields to safety. And if that ain't strength, I don't know nobody that can do that.
The neighbor dialed 911.
911, what's the emergency? This lady just came in and said somebody stole the baby. Someone stole her baby? Yes.
Then, with sheriff's deputies and an ambulance on the way, Stephanie took the phone and made a desperate plea.
I just need somebody to find. Okay, ma'am. We've got people coming.
Among the first at the scene, Deputy Matt Corbett drove straight to the Woods' residence.
Missouri State Highway Patrolman had arrived at her location, so we knew there was somebody with her.
Entering the blood-spattered living room, Corbett confirmed that the kidnapper and baby Abby were long gone. But where?
Highway 47 runs in front of the victim's residence. That's a state highway, and somebody could have just been going through and grabbed the child and took off.
Was it a random kidnapping? And if so, how did Stephanie's attacker know she had an infant at home?
There was a sign in Stephanie's front yard welcoming the new baby.
Meanwhile, at the neighbor's house, detectives questioned Stephanie while EMT struggled to save her life.
Lieutenant Detective Subkey was getting an interview with her literally in the back of the ambulance.
I got a brief description of what happened because the ambulance was really wanting to get her out.
And the crying toddler Stephanie still clutched in her arms further complicated the interview.
He wouldn't have anything to do with any of the cops. He was scared of them.
I'm sure he was pretty shaken up considering what he had witnessed.
Stephanie was also shaken up.
I remember being upset and crying, but I was more just in kind of a state of shock because I was like, okay, this is happening to us. We are going through this.
But what exactly had happened? All she could give the investigators was a short summary of the kidnapping and a vague description of her knife-wielding attacker.
She described her as a white female, heavyset, long, dark hair, had a ball cap, approximate age between 30s to 40s.
When Stephanie's mother, Raylene, arrived on the scene, she did what she could to comfort her daughter.
I just wanted to reassure her we were getting her back. Matter of fact, I pretty much promised and guaranteed we were going to get her back. But she seemed pretty desperate and confused.
Suffering multiple stab wounds, she was also in grave physical danger. Not long after Raylene arrived, a medevac helicopter was hovering overhead, summoned by the EMTs on the scene, who feared Stephanie wouldn't survive a long drive. Quickly transferred to the chopper, Stephanie was airlifted to St. John's Mercy in Washington, Missouri, the same hospital where she had given birth to baby Abby a week earlier.
I remember being upset and crying, but I was more just in kind of a state of shock because I was like, what now? What next?
Back at the crime scene, Sheriff Gary Tolke was thinking ahead too. As the helicopter disappeared over the horizon, he turned to Stephanie's mother with an urgent request.
They had asked if we had had a recent photo, and it dawned on me, well, yeah, I got lots of them. I'm a grandma.
It was the first lucky break in the investigation. Raylene's pictures revealed what could be the crucial piece of information in the hunt for baby Abby.
Baby Abby was born with a little strawberry mark on her forehead, a little stamp on her forehead.
The birthmark did help a lot because it was something identifiable. At that age, babies change so quickly.
The Franklin County Sheriff's Department immediately issued an Amber Alert for baby Abby. And by 6 o'clock that evening, the abduction was the lead story on every local newscast.
We was told by Sheriff Toki to try to get on the news. He felt that was pretty important.
Help!
Yeah. Help.
And if you're the one that done it, please bring her back. We don't have no issues with you. We just want her back.
Coming up, will a family's anguish turn to anger?
You're trained that in these type cases, family members are usually your first suspect.
And will the distraction allow the real kidnapper's trail to turn cold?
That's my baby.
By the early evening of September 15, 2006, police cars and camera crews surrounded the rural Missouri home of Stephanie and James Woods.
It was a huge response. There were police officers, federal investigators, and then also television stations and newspapers and radio stations were also there.
Following standard procedures, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department had issued an Amber Alert, and baby Abby's family had even made a desperate plea on the evening news.
I think they realized because they didn't have a lot and they had no idea where this baby was, that they needed the media to try to get out whatever information they could get out.
Barely a mile away, neighbor Rodney Beck may have wondered what all the camera crews were doing down the road, but he didn't have time to check the news when he got home from work. He had more pressing matters to deal with. His wife, Shannon, had just delivered a baby.
Her husband left for work one day, and when he came home, there's the baby.
Like Stephanie Woods, the baby would be Shannon's second, although Shannon's first baby had been stillborn.
The fetus was buried in a little memorial constructed there on the property.
In the 6 years since, the St. Louis native and her husband had resolved to try again. And in the spring of 2006, Shannon told Rodney and her family the good news. She was expecting.
I didn't want to jump into it. I waited. And once I made it to a certain point where I felt like I was safe with it is when I told everybody.
Days earlier, Shannon had learned that her sister Maria was also pregnant.
Her due date was literally 2 days at that time before mine. And then later on, we were the same date.
It was an amazing coincidence. And as the two pregnancies progressed in tandem, the sisters kept close tabs on how each was doing.
If I had a doctor appointment or she had a doctor appointment, we'd call each other and let us know what was happening.
And by the end of the summer, the entire Torres family was anxiously awaiting Shannon and Rodney's new arrival.
They fixed up a room for the baby. They decorated it all up, and we'd drive out there and look at it and check it out.
And we were already buying Christmas presents. I was really looking forward to having my family.
But the wait would be shorter than Shannon imagined. On the morning of September 15th, more than a week before her due date, Shannon started to feel what she believed to be symptoms of false labor.
I kind of felt like I was having somewhat contractions, and I thought they were just Braxton Hicks because they really weren't strong and they really weren't close together.
Instead of calling a doctor, Shannon went about her daily routine.
I walked over to the barn and fed the animals and did all of that.
But by the time she'd finished her chores, according to Shannon, the labor pains she was experiencing were anything but false.
About the time I came back from the barn, I think I was in full-fledged labor and didn't even really know it.
Shannon said she delivered the baby that afternoon at home.
That's all such a really vague memory. I remember coming back to my house and feeling like I was in labor and everything. And then I remember holding my daughter.
It was kind of Shazam. All of a sudden, she had this infant.
But why hadn't she called her husband? Why the surprise? The whole story seemed strange.
He started suspecting something, but really wasn't certain.
After all, Shannon had gone into premature labor before. Luckily, it seemed there'd been no stillborn this time. Instead, Shannon had a beautiful daughter that she'd named Millie Mae. And while she doted over the newborn, her husband captured the happy moment.
That's my baby.
Shannon claimed the child as her own, but was it? As she put Millie Mae to bed that night, barely a mile away, police were already searching for Stephanie Woods' missing daughter. Although even as they combed the crime scene for clues, investigators were starting to wonder, did the mysterious knife-wielding kidnapper even exist?
You're trained that in these type cases, family members are usually your first suspect that you look at, which is what we did.
Why would someone in the family want to harm the infant? While police couldn't pinpoint a motive, there were aspects of Stephanie's story that weren't adding up.
Stephanie never indicated that this person drove up, that she heard a vehicle, saw a vehicle, or anything like that, which was kind of peculiar.
Being close to a state highway like that, right along a state highway, you would think if somebody's going to abduct a child, they would pull in, do the abduction, and then they would leave.
Was Stephanie covering for someone? Or was her whole story of being attacked, tied to a chair and stabbed, simply made up, right down to self-inflicted wounds to add credence to her story? After all, Stephanie certainly wouldn't be the first mother who faked an abduction to cover something far worse.
They continued on the path that she may have been the person who did this to her daughter. And so that didn't entirely rule her out.
Questioning Stephanie further would have to wait, however. She was still recovering from surgery. That evening, investigators turned to her family instead.
It was traumatic for everybody, and law enforcement is supposed to be there to help, but then we have to ask questions that are kind of incriminating, or leading towards the family, and that's really tough to deal with, but it has to be done.
Stephanie's family, however, didn't hesitate to cooperate.
They wanted to know what happened that day and everything. I talked to them whenever they wanted me to.
Usually when you start to ask those type questions, it's, we've got an attorney, we're not talking to you anymore. But they told us whatever you need to do, do it.
James even volunteered to take a polygraph.
When you asked him, he readily said, yes, I'll take it.
The test cleared James. But what about Stephanie?
We couldn't really give her a polygraph. She had the injuries and was in the hospital and really in no shape for that.
In the meantime, all Stephanie could do was wait.
At that point, they still were kind of targeting me. So I don't think that they wanted to give me too much of an insight on where they were leading.
While Stephanie waited, the authorities scoured the woods around the crime scene. And it wasn't long before the search started paying off.
A couple hours after we got on scene, we did locate a knife in close proximity to the scene.
But did that prove Stephanie's story of a knife-wielding attacker? The investigators, at that point, couldn't be certain.
Maybe it might have been placed there as a diversion to keep us out of another area.
By Saturday morning, the search had intensified.
The Missouri National Guard company out of St. Clair was mobilized, and they did a field grid search of all of the rural areas around the house.
We stood next to each other with about 3 feet between each other and just walked a straight line at a real slow, deliberate pace, scanning the ground, looking for any evidence.
Stephanie's family also called in reinforcements.
Members of the extended family were out everywhere. They were making flyers of the baby, sitting on street corners, passing them out to cars as they went by.
But as Saturday passed, and then Sunday, with no new information about baby Abby, her family struggled to maintain optimism.
Family's in agony. The family's trying to be there for Stephanie. We're wondering what could happen to our Abby.
I thought this woman got Abby in a car and started driving and we would never see her again.
Authorities were doing everything they could to make sure that didn't happen. By the end of the weekend, baby Abby's image was everywhere, broadcast 24/7 by the national media.
We were putting all the information out as quickly as possible and getting the story out on the air.
You literally hope and pray that someone passed by, saw something, heard something, knew something, and would call in.
Coming up, the fateful phone call finally comes.
He said, I got to talk to you right away, and I could tell through his voice that something was wrong.
But had it come in time?
The sheriff asked to see us four alone. He didn't sound too confident.
I feared the worst at that point.
By Tuesday morning, September 19, 2006, it had been 4 days since a stranger had abducted week-old Abby Woods.
People across the whole United States of America, from Florida to California, were sending cards, they were sending letters, they were sending prayers.
The cards and prayers were little comfort to Stephanie Woods, the missing baby's mother. Released from the hospital, but still a suspect, she'd come home to her parents' house.
I couldn't get her to go to sleep, not even 20 minutes. When she tried to go to sleep, she would wake up in a shock. She would wake up scared and wake up crying and wanting Abby back. She ached for her.
For a few hours, just, where's my baby? I want my baby.
Would Stephanie ever see her child alive again? The investigators were starting to lose hope. That afternoon, in a field not far from the Woods house, searchers had found an ominous clue, an infant's onesie.
Major Copeland called me on my cell phone, and he said, I got to talk to you right away, and I could tell through his voice that something was wrong. That was good news that we found it. The bad news was it had blood on it.
Everyone feared that something had happened to this child, that perhaps it was dead.
Even more troubling to the investigators was where the search team had found the onesie.
There were 2 ponds in pretty close proximity to the residence, and we were thinking, well, maybe that was a diversion by whoever did this, and, the baby may be in a pond.
Sheriff Tolke called in a dive team to search the pond. Then he contacted baby Abby's family.
The sheriff had called me, and he asked to see us alone. The only thing I can tell you is that I began praying, because he didn't sound too confident.
Considering his urgency to need to talk to us that day, I feared the worst at that point.
The mood was grim that evening as Sheriff Tolke sat down with Abby's parents and grandparents.
Obviously, they were very upset. They knew, too, that this wasn't a very good sign.
But just as Abby's family braced for the worst, the sheriff's cell phone rang.
He turned the phone off, and it rang again, and he kept turning the ringer off, and it was persistent, so he said, I gotta take this.
The call only lasted a few seconds.
And it was the answer we needed. It was Abigail.
They're telling me the baby's alive. And you're going down and you go back up again. And
he started crying. Big old Sheriff Tolke started crying. I mean, his heart was in this just as much as everybody's heart was into finding baby Abby alive.
The tears spread around the room.
We didn't know how to handle the good news. It was the news we wanted, but we still didn't know how to handle it.
It's the most wonderful news in the world. And you're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do.
The news was the culmination of a chain of events that had started with another phone call more than 48 hours earlier. On Sunday, while police, guardsmen, and volunteers continued to scour the Missouri countryside for baby Abby, Shannon Torres placed a call to her sister-in-law Dorothy in St. Louis.
Shannon called her sister-in-law, said she had had a baby, and the sister-in-law finally convinced her to go to the doctor with this baby and get it checked out.
Shannon had also asked her sister-in-law for a ride. So on Tuesday morning, Dorothy Torres had driven out to Shannon's house in Franklin County. As soon as she'd arrived at the farm, however, Dorothy had become suspicious.
The sister-in-law realized there that this baby had makeup on her forehead.
She had been listening to the media and was aware of Abigail's disappearance, and she kind of started putting 2 and 2 together.
Shannon's husband, Rodney, by then, had also heard the media reports.
Shannon's husband had kind of wondered, he thought that the birth was odd. And, obviously he knew how close the abduction was.
Could Shannon be the kidnapper that was all over the news? Unsure of what to do, Dorothy drove her sister-in-law to the hospital.
When they got to the hospital, Shannon went inside.
Alone with the infant, Dorothy seized an opportunity. She wiped the makeup off her forehead and discovered a familiar-looking strawberry birthmark.
She realized this was this baby that was all over the news and people were searching for.
When Shannon returned a few minutes later, Dorothy confronted her. At first, Shannon denied Dorothy's accusation.
I think in her mind, this was real. This was the baby that God had given her.
Pressed by Dorothy, however, Shannon admitted the baby wasn't hers, but she denied being Stephanie's attacker.
Her comment was that she found Abby in a ditch.
First thing you want to do is believe her, because maybe this lady left the baby at the side of the road.
Whether Shannon had abducted Abby or not, one thing was clear: the baby had to be returned. That afternoon, Dorothy had left the baby with Shannon, but she had started making calls, filling in the rest of the family.
We were just sitting watching television, and Maria, my other daughter, had called and said, Mom, are you watching television? I said, yes, we are. She said, Mom, that's Shannon. She says, Mom, Shannon has that baby.
Soon the Torres family had formulated a plan. That afternoon, they'd contacted the authorities.
The concern of the Torres family was getting this baby safely back to her family.
There was a real fear once they realized that that baby did not belong to her, that if somebody confronted her, something would happen.
So with authorities alerted, the Torres family and Shannon's husband Rodney prepared to abduct baby Abby again.
Rodney and I walked in, we talked nonchalant, and then we went up to look at the baby, and he held the baby, and then within just a matter of moments, it was like, okay, I need to take the baby.
They were able to get this baby away from Shannon Torres and into the arms of the sister-in-law.
And once Dorothy had baby Abby in her arms, she whisked the infant into a waiting car. Shannon hadn't put up a fight.
She knew the baby needed to go back. She was very remorseful about what had happened, and she really didn't feel like she wanted to go on in this life anymore.
While Shannon struggled with what had happened, her family's thoughts turned to the other baby, the one that Shannon had carried for the last 9 months.
We knew that there was a baby, and we wanted to know what happened to that baby.
While the mystery of Shannon's baby remained unsolved, baby Abby had been found. That evening, she was rushed to a roadside rendezvous with the authorities.
The lady in the passenger side got out, cradling a child. I immediately approached the lady, asked her if this was baby Abby. She said yes.
Baby Abby was in safe hands, and it was at that moment that Sheriff Tolke's cell phone rang, interrupting his tense meeting with Abby's parents and grandparents.
To get a call out of the clear blue like that, that was quite an experience.
Less than half an hour later, Abby and her mother were reunited at a nearby hospital.
They wouldn't just turn her over. They had to make sure that she was okay, but they let Steph be in the room with her.
I had to see her. I had to touch her.
Stephanie Woods was finally able to do the one thing she'd spent almost 5 agonizing days aching to do: cradle her child.
We were escorted into the emergency room, and there Stephanie was holding her, and James was sitting right next to her. The baby looked just perfect, just perfect.
She was in extremely good health. There was no indication of any abuse or malnutrition or anything like that.
For Stephanie, James, and Abby, the ordeal was over. But for Shannon Torres, it had barely begun. As baby Abby was being reunited with her parents, a small force of Franklin County deputies descended upon the Torres farm. They found Shannon and the rest of the Torres family ready and waiting.
A family friend was an attorney. So she had an attorney immediately. She had an attorney before we even got there. So there was no questioning of her or anything like that after she had been taken into custody because she had invoked her rights.
There was no struggle, only tears.
She was sobbing, just out of control, crying, what have you. Her husband was there with her. He was attempting to console her.
It's more of just kind of a flash memory of knowing that one minute I was at home and then the next minute I'm in jail.
With Shannon in custody, investigators on the scene search for answers. What would drive Shannon Torres, a woman with no history of violence, to commit such an unthinkable crime? That's when Shannon's family informed police of both the loss of her first child and her recent pregnancy.
We believe that Shannon Torres had suffered a miscarriage and didn't want to tell her family that she had had a stillborn and went looking for a baby to replace the one she had lost.
But what had become of the stillborn?
It was an extensive search of the property and an area around there looking for this second baby, but it was never found.
Shannon wouldn't say what had happened to her infant either. Heeding advice from her attorney, she refused to speak. And at her arraignment 2 days later on September 21st, she maintained her silence.
She came in shackled, orange jumpsuit, very wild-eyed, kind of looking like she wasn't aware of her surroundings. She had been crying. She cried throughout the hearing.
The hearing was brief. The list of charges wasn't.
We charged her with burglary, several kidnapping, stealing. I believe it was 11 or 13 counts.
The prosecutors hit her with everything they could.
And how did Shannon respond to the many charges against her? Not guilty to all of them. Coming up, breaking silence for the first time, Shannon tells her side of the story.
I remember questioning, is this my baby? Is this the baby they're looking for?
On May 9, 2008, Shannon Torres once again stood in a Missouri courtroom. It had been almost 2 years since she had entered a not guilty plea for the kidnapping of 1-week-old Abby Woods.
There were negotiations and evaluations on mental capacity and whether or not she was able to stand trial, and that really did slow things up and took time.
In the end, the evaluations didn't matter. When Shannon arrived in court that morning, it wasn't to stand trial. It was to change her plea.
She made what is called an Alford plea, where she pled guilty, but she did not admit guilt.
I could have tried to see what a jury would give me, or we could just take what evidence was there and accept the fact that even though I don't remember doing this, that I obviously was involved in it.
With the evidence stacked against her, why wouldn't Shannon acknowledge her guilt? It was simple. She claimed to have no clear memory of the more than 72 hours she'd called baby Abby her own.
I try to look back and try to think of, remember bits and pieces of the day, or I should say the days, and I just can't seem to grab hold of it.
Shannon claimed her memory wasn't clear, but her victim would never forget the traumatic events of September 15, 2006. Stephanie Woods was able to positively identify Shannon as her attacker. And since baby Abby had been found in Shannon's possession, there was no denying what she'd done.
I accept the fact that even though I don't remember doing this, that I obviously was involved in it.
And now she would face a judge to determine her final sentence, which could be anywhere from 10 to 30 years in prison.
I was afraid of what was going to happen because either direction I knew that there was an outcome that could change my life dramatically.
On September 21, 2008, Shannon's sentencing hearing began. Prosecutor Robert Parks opened the hearing by requesting Shannon receive the maximum penalty allowed under law.
We wanted to make sure that Shannon Torres stayed in prison until Abby had reached majority.
To back up his request, Parks pointed to several factors. First, there was the premeditated nature of the crime.
She'd planned this out. She brought weapons with her. She brought a knife and a gun.
And the prosecutor added, it was a miracle Shannon didn't face murder charges.
We are very lucky that Stephanie wasn't killed.
That did not mean Stephanie had escaped unharmed, however. The entire family, according to the prosecutor, would carry the physical and mental scars of Shannon's actions for the rest of their lives.
Bob Parks talked about how the Oceanbine Woods family really lived in fear of this woman coming back and coming near their child again.
Let's just say that she got 10 years. Abby would only be 12 years old. Hardly be able to protect herself.
To underscore that fear, Parks called Stephanie to the stand. As she gave her victim's impact statement to the court, she faced Shannon for the first time since the attack. And this time, it was Stephanie who had the upper hand.
I had so many things that I had wanted to say directly to her, or I guess at her. it really just all kind of spilled out.
Stephanie Oceanbine asked the court for no mercy on Shannon Torres because they contended that Shannon Torres showed no mercy when she left Stephanie for dead.
But that, according to Stephanie, wasn't the worst thing Shannon had done.
This woman had made her feel like she would not be able to protect her children. And now she said, from woman to woman, you shouldn't have done this to me. And she made it very clear that she felt very betrayed by another woman.
But the question everyone wanted to know the answer to was what had driven Shannon to attack Stephanie and steal her baby. The answer, when the defense presented her case to the judge, was that Shannon also knew what it was like to lose a child. Shannon's lawyer reminded the judge that not only had she lost a baby years earlier, she had delivered a second stillborn child shortly before Abby's abduction.
Her lawyers argued at the sentencing hearing that she had been pregnant.
But was she really pregnant? According to the testimony of several witnesses, yes.
We all knew that there was a baby. We felt it. We'd seen all the telltale signs of her being pregnant.
Some people, her priest remembers putting her hand on Shannon Torres' stomach and remembers the baby kicking.
There was nothing that I can remember that gave me any signs that something was wrong.
But Shannon's pregnancy had come to a sudden, devastating end.
She'd suffered a second miscarriage. She wanted children, and she just wasn't thinking clearly, and something just snapped.
And the miscarriage, the defense claimed, had sent Shannon on a desperate search for another newborn.
Psychologists testified to the fact that she was suffering from a postpartum bipolar disorder.
In her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She wanted a baby.
And she'd spent the remainder of the weekend struggling with denial.
I had the back and forth battle in my head of, is this my baby? Is this, is this not? Is this the baby they're looking for?
It's for baby.
There was, however, one problem with the defense's claim. While a medical exam conducted after her arrest concluded she'd recently been pregnant, the defense could produce no evidence of a miscarriage or stillborn.
What we did not know is what had happened to the second child.
But in his closing argument, prosecutor Robert Parks didn't even bother to debate the question. Whether or not Shannon suffered a miscarriage was irrelevant as far as he was concerned. Instead, he asked the judge to focus on the things Shannon had already admitted doing.
One thing the prosecution did make clear is the fact that no matter what her mental state was, it was not excusable for her to go in, slash a woman's throat, and steal her infant baby. Coming up, will Shannon's tragic story lead to mercy?
I always expected that there was going to be some sort of punishment, but I hoped for the best.
In September of 2006, Stephanie and James Wood spent 5 agonizing days dealing with the loss of their daughter. 2 years later, on the afternoon of September 12, 2008, it was the Torres family's turn.
They were a very tight, close-knit family, and the family had really been blown apart and devastated by this.
Now, only one question remained. What would the judge's sentence be? Shannon faced as few as 10 years, but prosecutors asked for the maximum of 30.
I always expected that there was going to be some sort of punishment, but I hoped for the best, not for the worst.
She would be disappointed.
Without a blink, the judge slammed his gavel and he said 30 years.
Abby's family was elated.
The way she did this, she was very violent, and it was wrong. And she got the 30 years that she deserved.
Meanwhile, the Torres family struggled to deal with the loss.
For him to come down with 30 years, I think that's what blew us all away.
Today, Shannon is in prison, serving 30 years for a crime she still maintains she can't remember.
I really don't have an explanation to her as much as I really would want her to know that I was sorry for anything that she ever had to go through.
Stephanie, likewise, still has trouble coming to grips with what happened that September afternoon.
Because of Shannon and what she had done to me, I can understand the loss of a baby. And I can understand the want for a baby. But I don't think I'll ever be able to wrap my mind completely around why would she want to put any other human being through that pain.
Stephanie not only understands the pain of losing a child, she also knows the joy of getting one back.
When she's old enough to understand, James and I will tell her, okay, look, this is how much we wanted you. We fought this hard to get you back.
They were the quintessential Sin City couple.
The come to Las Vegas and conquer it couple.
He wanted to be the best poker player.
Unfortunately, it just wasn't in the cards.
Police receive a phone call. There's a dead body at the Panorama Towers.
He had approximately 15 stab wounds.
Had the gambler gone in debt to the wrong people? Or was there another explanation? The answer depended upon the one wild card still in play.
His wife was nowhere to be found at the time when they discovered the body.
And when she finally turned up, her story would lead detectives deep into Las Vegas's dark side.
This story has a murder, drug use, and a botched suicide.
I just didn't want to live anymore.
Overlooking the Vegas Strip, just west of the Bellagio's world-famous fountains, the Panorama Towers command an impressive view and an impressive price.
The Panorama Towers were one of the first kind of luxury high-rises to be built here in Las Vegas, and it attracted a lot of the celebrities, a lot of the celebrity poker players.
But on the evening of April 13, 2007, Las Vegas police received notice that one of the Panorama's high-rolling residents had just checked out permanently.
We received a call through our dispatch center that there was a dead body at the Panorama Towers.
Who was the caller? And more importantly, who was the victim? In a place like the Panorama, identifying the corpse might not be too difficult.
Individuals that lived there would probably be globally one of your wealthiest and most famous people.
People like Pamela Anderson, Tobey Maguire, Leonardo DiCaprio owned condos in the Panorama Towers.
Entering the condo with a security guard's key, police didn't immediately recognize the dead man sprawled in the bedroom, but they knew a homicide when they saw one.
Our body is obviously stabbed to death. There are many stabs.
He's covered in sheet, he's in his underwear. It's quite a grisly scene.
According to the name on the condo's lease, the dead man was Bill Gustafic, a retired chiropractor and aspiring card shark. Gustafic had spent the past several years trying to make it as a professional poker player.
He had some success early on. He was trying to build a reputation for himself in the poker circuit.
It's very, very hard to make it as a professional player. And most of the time, people really do not have a good grasp of what they're up against.
Now, with his career cut suddenly short, police were left wondering two things. Who had dealt the final blow?
When I first heard that someone was killed there, I thought it was either an inside job or a professional hit.
And where was the dead man's wife, 49-year-old Jill Rockcastle?
She just disappeared after that. Nobody knew where she was.
Did Jill's disappearance mean she was also in danger?
Jill acted to save her own life.
Or was her absence what in the poker world is known as a tell?
There's no forced entry, and that generally means that somebody with access to the condo would be a prime suspect.
In a way, Jill Rockcastle had been a gambler long before she married a poker player. She'd done quite well for herself in the high-stakes world of California real estate.
I worked in financing my entire career. I was doing small business loans. And then when the housing market and the mortgage market got to be a much more viable loan product than an SBA loan, I began working in the mortgage industry.
Jill was very savvy financially. She made plenty of money on her own. She was good at what she did.
But while fiscally independent, the year 2000 found the recent divorcee looking to get in better physical shape. So she joined a gym.
She's always been active, sports and health conscious and appearance-wise, you got to be physically fit. She did go through a bodybuilding phase. She really buffed up at one point.
Jill's sister wasn't the only one who noticed. Bay Area chiropractor Bill Gustafic belonged to the same gym.
He was so full of energy and he was charming, so charming. He was just really a presence.
Formerly a competitive bodybuilder, Bill's presence was tough to ignore. He and Jill started talking between weightlifting sessions, and before long, learned they were both recently divorced.
When Bill and I met, he was going through a very difficult time. He was fighting every day with his ex-wife.
The couple started dating, and in addition to their personal relationship, Jill says she also shared her financial know-how to help Bill grow his practice.
He was able to open another clinic all by himself, and I helped him build that.
Soon he'd added a third office and started expanding beyond chiropractics.
He also had acupuncture, he had massage, he brought in a medical doctor and a pharmacist and started dispensing pain medications.
He was successful, she was successful, and they were drawn to each other because of that.
With business booming, Jill decided she and Bill were in need of some quality R&R. And for Jill's money, there was no better place to get away than Sin City.
I was very familiar with Las Vegas. I had a lot of contacts here.
Jill introduces Bill to the VIP life, and Bill is seduced by this lifestyle.
My brother took to it very readily. He loved the life, he loved the atmosphere.
Bill wasn't alone. The heady world of tournament poker had just hit the big time.
It was about then that the World Poker Tour started to televise their events.
They turn it into something a little more glamorous, and so people think, well, I can be that, I can beat him.
That was certainly Bill's response.
Bill always wanted to be a poker player. We would play as kids, with the family, and he was always really good at it, even as a kid.
He wants to be the bright lights of superstardom in the poker world.
Bill told Jill he wanted to become a professional poker player. And whether she liked it or not, he was going all in.
I never saw my husband set his mind to do something that he didn't do.
Soon, Bill and Jill were traveling to Vegas at every opportunity.
If he wasn't at the table in Las Vegas or an Indian casino, he was at home playing poker on a computer.
Because of the internet, you could play thousands of hands in a very short time span. That's how a lot of them got a lot of experience.
Bill didn't spend all his time in Vegas at the casinos, however. In 2005, he and Jill made a quick trip to a wedding chapel.
We had a private ceremony here in Las Vegas in April of 2005. And then we had the reception in Lake Tahoe.
But as soon as the honeymoon was over, the couple headed back to Vegas, where Bill was determined to make a name for himself on the poker scene.
Bill's odds were probably long, but it's not to say it couldn't happen. It's happened before.
He was smart, he was driven. Whatever he focused on, he achieved.
Bill was so driven that he all but turned his back on what he'd already achieved.
He walked away from the businesses, he walked away from everything. I took over, taking care of them.
According to Jill, her job was to make sure the cash kept flowing.
His clinics were based on workman's compensation. He put in a number of different services, that he could bill and, be reimbursed under workman's compensation.
The proceeds from the clinics would bankroll Bill's budding poker career.
He was ready just to get out of it and semi-retire to become a professional poker player.
He thought that he was going to win, and he was going to become a major poker player, and he was going to have all the money that he needed.
In February of 2006, Bill entered a professional tournament at California's Bay 101 card room. He finished 10th and won $80,000.
For him, it was just validation that he could do it, that he could be a player and that he could do this.
After collecting his big winnings in California, the couple leased $1 million condo in Las Vegas's Panorama Towers.
Panorama Towers is a high-end condo just west of the Strip overlooking the Bellagio Casino.
Of all the condos that I've gone up in this town in the last few years, Panorama Towers is some of the most prestigious.
The condo lease was only the beginning of Bill's plan to conquer Sin City.
He bought into some games at some very exclusive casinos.
Some of the World Poker Tour events or the World Series circuit events where buy-ins are $5,000 and $10,000 apiece.
And the ante to be a player in the Vegas social scene was just as steep.
Bill and Jill were very much the come to Las Vegas and conquer it couple, playing with the bigger name players, rubbing elbows with them, becoming part of that scene. And in order to do that, it's quite an investment.
Poker players party harder than rock stars. See them in the clubs, they'll be the first ones that are buying most expensive bottles of champagne, and they have all the girls around them.
And while Bill was at the poker table, Jill did her best to fit right in.
She loved getting her facials and you know, going shopping.
I really enjoyed Las Vegas. I was given the same comp program that as if I were a high roller player.
Spa visits and boutique shopping, however, were only the beginning of Jill's Vegas makeover.
She had big fake boobs, plastic face, and the whole 9 yards.
Bill also invested considerable cash in perfecting his poker face.
He had had cosmetic surgery and hair implants and totally changed his whole look.
He was going to be a TV poker personality. He wanted to look good for the job.
In February of 2000, Bill competed in the Ultimate Poker Challenge at Binion's Casino, his first televised tournament.
We're here with Bill Gustovic. How are you feeling about the game this evening?
I'm very excited. It's going to be a good time.
Now, I know you haven't played in one of these before. Is your strategy going to change at all?
No, I don't think so. I'm just going to try to last as long as I can, actually.
From their condo in the Panorama, it may have looked like Bill and Jill's dream of conquering Vegas had come true. But it was all a bluff.
It was a total nobody as far as the poker world goes.
In fact, it was worse than that.
Bill was a fish in a very large shark tank. The players look forward to having Bill come to the tables.
As much of a passion as it was, he virtually always lost.
Okay, guys, we're here with Bill. Now, unfortunately, we're saying goodnight to you. What happened, Bill?
You know, I could tell you all another bad beat on the river story, but I won't. No, actually, I did take a couple bad beats on the river, and then I went all in. I had top pair with a flush draw. King Annex didn't hit me, so the guy had overpair and beat me, so it happens.
But would he learn from his losses? In April of 2007, Bill signed up for yet another high-profile tournament at the Bellagio.
He believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could win, and that if he could just have that big win, then everything else would be okay.
He was wrong. Not only was Bill Gustovic knocked out early in the tournament's preliminary round, the aspiring poker champ had played his final hand.
The best of the best players come here, and for 90% of them or more, this is their graveyard.
It was just after 7:30 p.m. on Friday, April 13th, when a call came into the Las Vegas PD. The man on the phone claimed to be an attorney from California, and he said he had information that just might be of interest to the police.
He gave them information that a body was located at the Panorama Towers.
Coming up, police asked the obvious question. Just how did the mysterious California attorney know about the body?
He stated that his client was responsible for the homicide.
At around 7:30 p.m. on April 13th, 2007, Las Vegas police received a phone call reporting a dead body in a luxury condominium overlooking the Strip. The report itself wasn't all that unusual.
A lot of poker players get very desperate just to get back into another tournament. It definitely could have been a suicide in this town.
But that night, once building security let police in, it was immediately obvious the dead man in the condo hadn't killed himself.
He's covered in a sheet, there's multiple stab wounds, he's in his underwear.
The dead man was Bill Gustafick, but where was his wife?
Jill Rockcastle was nowhere to be found at the time when they discovered the body.
Was she also dead, or perhaps on the run? Considering Bill's gambling career, police couldn't rule out the latter.
Tournaments are so expensive to buy in. A lot of people will borrow money to get into them. And if you don't win the whole damn thing, you kind of, you're on the run for a while.
He could have possibly swindled someone out of money, or maybe he didn't pay a bad debt.
And based on the crime scene, loan sharks weren't the only people Bill may have been in debt to.
Crime scene analysts took a number of photographs with bottles of steroids and growth hormones.
Gambling debts? Drugs? Was Bill's murder the work of a pro? One thing was certain, the killer had come and gone quietly. There was no sign of a forced entry.
All the doors and windows were locked from the inside.
Locked doors and windows weren't the only security measures that the killer would have had to have bypassed either.
The apartments have amenities such as 24-hour guard security.
Bill's killer had also left few traces behind.
The perpetrator cleaned up the scene and removed the sheets, and they seemed to clean the apartment pretty well.
But not too well.
They did find some blood spatter on pillows and on the headboard and on the wall above the headboard near the body.
And in a dumpster 23 floors below in the building's basement, police found bloody sheets and a knife they believed came from the condo.
There was a butcher block in the kitchen that had knives in it, and there was one space that was empty.
The knife matched the others in the knife block in the kitchen, and it also had blood on it.
Leaving the murder weapon at the crime scene didn't appear to be the work of a professional.
A lot of people don't think clearly. Criminals do really dumb things in the heat of passion.
The botched cleanup wasn't the only thing that led police to suspect an amateur assassin either. Why, for instance, had the killer covered Bill's body?
Most of the time, people cover it because they don't want to see it. You got a lot of blood, you got knife wounds, sometimes the eyes are open. It's not a very pretty sight.
A squeamish killer, rookie mistakes, and the ease with which Bill's murderer had come and gone, it all led investigators to one conclusion.
From evidence left of the scene, they immediately suspect it's Jill.
But where was she? That evening, barely an hour after finding Bill's body, police called the man who'd first sent them to the condo, a California attorney named Ralph Hughes.
I called the dispatch center. I gave him my name and my cell phone number, and I got a phone call sometime later.
And just how, the detective asked, had Ralph Hughes known there was a dead body in Bill and Jill's condo?
He stated that his client was responsible for the homicide.
Ralph refused to give the detectives a name, however.
I wasn't going to disclose who my client was. All I would do is refer to the client as the client.
But the detective quickly caught on.
By then, they had found out that Bill was married, and obviously the wife wasn't there. So, rightfully so, he was asking questions about that.
Ralph Hughes never did give the detective a name, but his client was Jill Rockcastle. And the phone call that sent police to the condo was the culmination of a chain of events that had begun almost 24 hours earlier. Ralph Hughes, a business attorney, had known Jill and Bill for several years. They were clients. And when Jill called him on April 12th, he assumed it was a routine matter.
She just asked to meet with me, and I just couldn't meet with her that day, and she was okay with me meeting with her the next afternoon.
But when Jill showed up for the appointment on Friday afternoon, it quickly became apparent that the situation was anything but routine.
It was obvious that she had been crying, and she seemed very upset.
I believe that I was in what they call post-traumatic shock. like a hysterical kind of amnesia. I couldn't remember everything anyway.
What she could remember, however, was more than enough to leave Ralph shocked too.
She just blurted out that she had killed Bill. And when she said that, it caught me by surprise. It wasn't what I was expecting. So I asked her, I said, well, Bill who? And she says, I killed Bill. And then when she said that, she just fell apart.
It all hit me. I had caused him to lose his life.
That evening, as Hughes had calmed Jill down, he'd also pieced together what had happened, or at least Jill's version of events.
She told me that he had basically run out of money, gambling.
The trouble had started, according to Jill, with the clinics.
When Governor Schwarzenegger took office, he revamped workman's compensation. He literally cut the income of a chiropractor by at least 2/3.
By the spring of 2007, the situation had become desperate.
I was helping him too. I was giving him money too, from my savings from my life.
But even with Jill helping out, the money wouldn't last.
The businesses were not even covering their expenses. We weren't able to pay some of our bills. It was just, he had to win. He knew that he had to win, or it had to stop.
But Bill, according to Jill, had no plans of stopping.
He just knew in his heart that he was going to win. He just knew someday it was going to happen. It was his turn.
So that March, Jill had gone back to California to come up with the $5,000 entry fee as a last-ditch effort to stave off disaster.
He began to sell off his practices at that time.
This man, in one way or another, liquidated almost every asset he had to chase this dream of becoming a professional poker player.
Jill scraped up the cash, but in Vegas on the 11th, she claimed she also staged an intervention.
I wanted it to stop. I wanted him to listen to me. I wanted him to get help. I asked him to please don't play anymore.
They had some words. Apparently he was pretty upset over that.
Bill, according to what Jill told her attorney, had eventually calmed down and gone to bed. But the next morning, the fight had started again.
He was agitated, and they had a discussion that became rather vocal.
And according to Jill, it quickly turned physical.
It just got to the point where he lost control.
Jill told Ralph she'd tried to run away, but Bill wouldn't allow her.
He placed himself between the kitchen and the only point of exit, which is the door going into a hallway. He made various threats.
That's when Jill said she'd grab the knife.
There was a knife set in a wooden block, and she pulled the knife out.
And Jill claims she'd grabbed the knife just in time. Charged by the enraged bodybuilder, she retreated to the bedroom.
She just started swinging at him and ended up stabbing him.
I just didn't want to die. I didn't want to die.
On Friday evening, April 13th, more than 24 hours after Jill had fatally stabbed her husband, her attorney was on the phone with police, negotiating her surrender.
Jill actually was anxious to surrender. She really wanted to get it over with.
But why the delay? It was, according to Hughes, his doing. He wanted time to turn the case over to a criminal defense attorney.
The deal that I made with the Las Vegas homicide unit was that he would surrender her on Monday.
Coming up, a pending murder case isn't all Jill's anxious to get over with.
I just didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live anymore.
On Friday, April 13, 2007, it appeared that Bill Gustavik's luck had taken a turn for the worse when police discovered the professional poker player stabbed to death in his Las Vegas condo. And his wife, Jill Rockcastle, had wielded the knife.
After she realizes that she's killed Bill, she goes ahead and disposes of the knife through the garbage chute, cleans up the apartment, the bedroom. She's washed the sheets, the comforter, and then she flees to California.
And once in California, Jill had confessed to her attorney.
In her statement to her attorney, she's supposed to turn herself in to the police.
She would turn herself in on the Monday after the homicide occurred.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't end up being that simple. Instead of turning herself in, Jill disappeared.
Monday rolled around and no Jill Rockcastle.
Where had she gone? The only clues were in a shocking email police received that morning. The first half of the 10-page statement had been written by her attorney, Ralph Hughes.
I prepared a very detailed email to her, which basically put out pretty much all the information that I had received from Jill.
But why the delay? It was, according to Hughes, his doing. He wanted time to turn the case over to a criminal defense attorney.
She can take the email, give it to the new attorney so that the new attorney wouldn't have to basically grill her like I had spent hours doing.
Jill, as instructed, forwarded the email on Sunday evening, just hours before she was supposed to surrender to Las Vegas police. But she didn't just send it to the defense attorney Hughes had arranged.
She had emailed it to several individuals who had provided that email to us.
Jill sent the email to her family, Bill's family, even his ex-wife.
You know, clients always surprise you. Some surprises are bigger than others.
But why did she send it? Was she asking forgiveness? Or was she offering an explanation for her actions? In the note, for instance, Jill made detailed claims about her late husband's heavy drug use.
The cocaine, he did it constantly during the tournaments to keep himself awake. And he'd just get to the point where he'd get almost too hyper.
And then there were Jill's allegations about Bill's sexual habits.
Once before, he had choked me to the point where I was, that he had to resuscitate me.
But not everyone who received Jill's email bought her story.
She murdered my brother, and then she had to come up with a way to make it all right so that she wouldn't have to pay for it.
Bill's family didn't believe a word of what they read. But would the police? Ralph Hughes knew Jill would need a good defense attorney, which is why he instructed her to write the email in the first place.
Hopefully it would give the new attorney a starting point to, prepare a defense.
Jill, however, had strayed from the plan. She'd added her own 5-page statement to the 5 pages initially prepared by her attorney.
She had supplemented it. The email was a very detailed mea culpa.
And Jill's email confession covered way more than just Bill's murder.
It was somewhat rambling, somewhat unfocused, but the accusations it contained were quite wild.
Well, in this email, she includes a lifestyle of real estate schemes and all sorts of fraudulent activity to make more money.
According to Jill's email, she and Bill had spent years conning multiple business partners out of thousands of dollars to fund both their expensive lifestyle and Bill's poker addiction.
She embezzled money from the chiropractic offices. The doctor that was taking over was paying a monthly amount to buy it, and they were getting that money and then not paying the bills, not even paying the employees, just robbing Peter to pay Paul.
And according to the email, Jill and Bill's schemes hadn't been limited to their business associates.
She wasn't just conning people in a far-out circle. She was conning people closest to her. She embezzled money from one of her friends, quite a bit, conned her out of several $100,000. Their next-door neighbor was conned out of $50,000.
The letter asks for forgiveness from Bill and Jill's friends, family, and acquaintances. Everybody who they allegedly scammed out of money.
But the email did more than just ask forgiveness. It also made clear that Jill intended to pay for what she'd done.
I just didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live anymore.
The email ends with a statement that if I'm not successful in this suicide attempt, at the very least, it will ensure my conviction.
One of Bill's relatives forwarded the email to Las Vegas police, who immediately alerted California authorities of Jill's possible suicide attempt.
Jill and Bill had a home in California, and they had checked with police there to see if she had been there.
Officers respond, they knock down the door, only to find that there's nobody home.
So just where was Jill? Family and friends told California investigators she was staying at a bed and breakfast in nearby San Luis Obispo, California.
The police in San Luis Obispo had the address of the bed and breakfast. They were able to quickly go there, locate what room she was staying in, and make entry.
Inside the room, police found Jill Rockcastle slumped across her bed. She was unconscious, but still alive.
She tried to overdose on a number of different prescription medications.
I did it seriously. I tried to take my own life. And then they found me, and then that's when they brought me to the hospital. And then I was in intensive care.
Jill spent the next 2 weeks in a California hospital.
When I got the call that Jill had tried to commit suicide and was in the hospital in a coma, my first thought was, she has to be okay. She has to come out of this.
But why had she done it? Was it the act of a distraught woman or a guilt-ridden one? Either way, the Las Vegas police wanted to make sure a jury got the chance to decide.
Las Vegas authorities worked to obtain a governor's warrant to extradite her back to Nevada.
Charged with murder, Jill was arrested on April 17th while still in the hospital. And by the time Jill was extradited to Nevada on May 4th, police considered her conviction as close to a sure bet as Vegas gets.
The evidence against Jill is quite overwhelming. They have a murder weapon, they have the email confession.
Coming up, as Jill's trial date draws nearer, new details emerge.
He wasn't just gonna beat me this time. He wasn't just gonna choke me. He wasn't just gonna hit me.
On May 23, 2007, a Nevada grand jury convened to consider an indictment against Jill Rockcastle. After surviving a suicide attempt, she'd been arrested for the murder of her husband, professional poker player Bill Gustafick. And in a lengthy email composed before her suicide attempt, Jill admitted stabbing him with a butcher knife.
It pretty much laid out their lives, the problems that they were having, how she killed Bill.
But the email, initiated by her attorney, had also claimed she'd acted in self-defense.
I never wanted anything to happen to him. I loved him. I just didn't want to die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But were all of the allegations in Jill's wide-ranging confession true? When prosecutors started presenting evidence to the grand jury, at least some of Jill's story held up. Her late husband's drug use, for instance.
We know for a fact, based on the state's own evidence, that he was using illicit substances. We know that he was using cocaine. We know that he was using other illegal drugs.
But the deputy Clark County medical examiner determined that unlike what Jill had written in her email, Bill's autopsy revealed she'd stabbed her husband far more than 3 times.
According to the coroner's report, Bill had been stabbed 15 times.
The one in the chest that went 5.5 inches deep went right through the heart.
The medical examiner also claimed Bill had at least 7 additional defensive wounds, clear signs that Bill was the victim, not the attacker.
These stabs are on the arms and on the back of the hands. This indicates to me that the person was attempting to defend themselves.
And if Jill and Bill had fought in the bedroom doorway as described in her email, how did blood spatter wind up on the headboard of the bed?
The blood on this situation indicated that Bill was lying down at the time.
According to the authorities, the bloody bedding police recovered from the basement dumpster also supported the theory.
It had entry-type slits that appeared to be where the knife went through the body and into the sheets.
Bill, in that sense, was attacked while he was lying flat on the bed.
Combined with the fact that Bill's body had been found clad only in underwear, prosecutors asserted that Jill had most likely ambushed her husband while he was sound asleep.
It's likely in this case that Bill was attacked, woke up, and because he was already so mortally wounded, he was unable to fend off the attack completely and succumbed to the wounds.
But why kill Bill in the first place? According to the authorities, it was out of anger over Bill's runaway gambling addiction.
She was extremely overcome with emotion and rage and attacked Bill when he was asleep. I mean, that many stab wounds indicates anger or rage.
Or was there another explanation? What if, contrary to what Jill had claimed in her email, Bill hadn't been involved in the shady financial schemes that bankrolled their Vegas lifestyle?
I believe that Bill thought that Jillian had the finances under control. He found out and he confronted her.
Bill, in an interview taped during one of his poker tournaments, certainly implied that Jill controlled the couple's finances.
Now, is any additional pressure added because we've got some cameras on this one?
My pressure comes from my wife. She's like, if I lose my money, I get a monthly allotment. So she said, okay, this is it.
Whatever the motivation was, the grand jury apparently found the forensic evidence against Jill overwhelming.
It took them 5 minutes to indict Jill, and the indictment came back very quickly.
The charge? First-degree murder.
They were talking about sending me to prison for 40 years to life.
And with the prosecutors apparently holding all cards, what could Jill do to stop them? After all, she'd already committed a 10-page confession to paper.
Honestly, as a defense attorney, that email was my worst nightmare.
But how accurate had the email account of Bill's death been? Held without bail as the weeks went by, she and her attorney met repeatedly to prepare a defense. They didn't defend Jill's original account of the attack, however. Instead, as her trial date drew closer, Jill's story started to change.
It took her a long time, months, to recall, and many jail visits, not just, by myself, but by a psychiatrist, to finally get to the point where just Jill would all of a sudden remember.
Jill still said she'd acted in self-defense, only now she claimed that the fight didn't start in the kitchen. Instead, Jill said it started in the bedroom, when she inadvertently walked in on her husband.
He was watching a pornographic DVD.
Only Jill claimed that Bill wasn't content to simply sit back and watch the action on screen.
They ended up on the bed, and he grabbed her by the hair and put his other arm around her neck, and he was preparing to abuse her sexually.
And according to Jill, it wouldn't be the first time he abused her.
He would have these very big mood swings. It would go from he would be nice, and then he would, lose control.
And that last night in the condo, with Bill flat broke and his poker career a bust, Jill claimed her husband had lost all control.
He wasn't just gonna beat me this time. He wasn't just gonna choke me. He wasn't just gonna hit me. This was it. This was it.
That's when, according to Jill's new story, she'd grabbed the knife to protect herself. But instead of retrieving it from the kitchen, she now claimed it was lying beside the bed at her ready all along. In fact, Jill claimed it was Bill who'd brought it into the bedroom.
We could account for the knife. That knife was there to open a pornographic DVD.
Jill's new story explained away evidence used to indict her. But why hadn't she told it before? According to her attorney, it was due to the years of abuse she'd suffered at her husband's hands.
But we're dealing with a battered woman's syndrome here. It's like a post-traumatic stress disorder.
It was only after Bill was dead, according to her attorney, that Jill could distance herself from his abuse and begin to deal with its effects.
When you're involved in that, you don't see what battered wife syndrome is. You don't know how much you're manipulated and controlled. You don't see that.
It took her a while to get to the point where she could even really specifically recall in detail what she had been experiencing.
It was abuse that, according to Jill, she'd hidden from friends and family for years.
You think that you're protecting them when you don't tell anybody that you're being abused. You think that you're protecting your family and that you're protecting your relationship, but you aren't.
Worse, from Jill's perspective, her denial left no record of the abuse that supposedly led to Bill's death.
There was nothing mentioned of police reports of prior domestic violence, of hospital records of treatment for domestic violence.
There's no indication of family members or other friends that ever witnessed this type of behavior from Bill.
The family and friends police spoke to said it was Jill who was often aggressive and out of control.
Jillian was just angry all the time. She always had a glass of wine with her and often a bottle.
Contradictory testimony from Bill's friends and family wasn't the biggest obstacle the defense would have to overcome either. When the case went to trial, prosecutors could simply sit back and ask how jurors could trust a woman who'd already changed her story once was telling the truth.
Her story about what happened that day changed several times.
I changed quite a bit, which leads me to believe that she was making a lot of things up as she went along.
But would 12 jurors be as skilled at reading people as a professional poker player? Coming up, Jill weighs the odds.
8 years, I can do that. I can do that.
By September 1st, 2008, Jill Rockcastle was 2 weeks away from facing trial for murder. Charged in the stabbing death of her husband, the 50-year-old widow faced life in prison if convicted. Prosecutors were confident in their case.
You had Jill fleeing, you had her statement that she made in her email. It was a very, very strong case.
Jill, despite the odds against her, was just as confident in her defense team.
I believed that they could prove everything. I believed that I wanted to go to trial.
But would Jill's new story convince a jury? No one would ever find out. On September 16th, her defense team suddenly, unexpectedly, folded.
Jill had decided that she didn't want to put herself through a trial.
Her reason? While she still maintained her innocence, Jill claimed she wanted to spare her family the agony of testifying at trial.
Everything that they were going to do, everything that they were going to have to tell everyone, and everything that the children would have to hear, everything that his family would have to go through. And it just, as we went through the process of preparing for the trial, I couldn't do it.
Jill's attorney approached prosecutors and proposed that Jill enter what's known as an Alford plea.
She takes an Alford plea, which means that she doesn't admit guilt, but accepts the fact that prosecutors have enough evidence to convict her.
I can't say I'm guilty. I won't. I can't say that.
Under the proposed term of the plea, she would agree to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years and credit for time served.
I've already done almost 20 months now. I would have to go for 8 years. I can do that. And so that's why I did this.
Prosecutors agreed to Jill's Alford plea. Now serving life in prison, Jill maintains her innocence, and she has devoted herself to helping victims of abuse.
If I can help just one family not have something this bad happen to them, then the loss of my husband's life wasn't for nothing, and this all wasn't for nothing.